Hello everyone, my name is Marco Landry and today I will be completing the process of upgrading my brake system by installing some SpeedBleeder valves on my front caliper, back caliper, and also on the master cylinder. So far, I've replaced pretty much all the components of the brake system. The last thing that I want to do now is install these SpeedBleeder valves to speed up the process and simplify the process of flushing the brake fluids from your brake line. So keep watching and you'll understand why this is such a critical component to simplify your life when you're doing a brake fluid change on your bike. Alright guys, so as I mentioned earlier, installing these last three SpeedBleeder valves on the bike will be the last thing needed in order for me to complete the upgrade to my braking system. And just to give you a bit of background, so far in terms of upgrades to the braking system, I've swapped my master cylinder with a Brembo RCS-15 unit. I also upgraded the front caliper with a Brembo unit. I replaced the OEM brake line with some stainless steel braided brake lines from L Performance. And I also replaced both disc rotors with some high performance and lighter disc rotors. So these are the upgrades that I did in terms of equipment or hardware. I also had to slightly modify my bodywork so that brake line here could move freely without being tangled in front of the bike. So I just had to shave the inside of my upper fairing for this to work properly. So all of these parts that I purchased so far were related to making the bike more efficient, braking better, better feeling. So all of this was really around performance. These last modifications today with these SpeedBleeder valves are not about improving performance. It's about improving serviceability of the bike and making sure that when you need to replace the brake fluid in your brake line, it's going to be a lot simpler and a lot faster. So having said that, let's start and I'll show you how this is done. I have this on all my bikes, my dirt bikes, my two R6, my Ducati. It works like a charm. I not only installed them at the caliper level, but I also installed them at the master cylinder level as well. So it's definitely making the process of flushing that oil a lot easier. Having said that, you need to understand that these are strictly used for a system that's been activated. So if your brake line is dry, this will not work because you can't push the air out. You will need to keep your OEM valves on, do a first flush, and once there's a bit of oil or brake fluid, then you can use the SpeedBleeder valves. But again, it will not work with a dry system. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that when you order these, you have to order the proper size. So for the Brembo calipers and the master, I'm using the M10x1, and for the OEM rear brake or the rear caliper, I'm using the M7x1. So again, these are things that you need to figure out before you place your order. But the nice thing about SpeedBleeder, the website is okay. I mean, it's a bit difficult to decode all the various options that they have. If you are not sure, pick up the phone and call them. I've called them a couple of times when I place order. The people there are super helpful. They are willing to do some research, help you out. And I've had nothing but great service from SpeedBleeder. So I highly recommend purchasing from them. The other thing that you need to know is that even though we're using the metric size valves, when you get these products, they are using the non-metric wrench size. You'll have various sizes depending on the size of the valve that you're using, but normally it will be either 1/4 inch, 5/16, and also I took a note here, 3/8 or 7/16. So these will be the 4 different size of wrench that will be needed depending on the size of the valve that you're using. So again, a very important thing that if you purchase these products, they're not using a metric size wrench to secure them in place. You'll need to use the SAE or the non-metric components, or the non-metric tools, I should say. So having said that, now we're all set to start the installation process. The installation process, as you will see, is very easy. It's simply a matter of replacing the OEM valves and plugging these in as a replacement. We'll be losing a bit of oil, but we'll just clean up everything and refill the fluid at the right level after that. So stay tuned, and when I come back, we'll start the process of replacing the OEM valves with the SpeedBleeder valves. Okay, so the first step again will be to replace that bleeder valve with the SpeedBleeder valve. And I've already wrapped everything because, as you know, the brake fluid is not good for paint. It will definitely eat at paint. So you want to make sure that everything's covered, everything is protected. And I'm gonna use my 11mm to undo the valve on the master cylinder. And again, this is the Brembo master cylinder that I have on my R3. So I'll undo this, and then we'll start threading the SpeedBleeder valve. And in order to secure this, I'm going to be using a 7/16 wrench. That's what we're going to be doing. And because of the sealant here, it's going to be a bit more difficult to thread in place. So that's why you definitely need to have this wrench handy to make sure you can do that transition between the 2 valves very quickly. Again, I'm going to keep this one in my hand very close by. I'm going to crack this open here. And once it's open, I'm quickly going to unscrew it. Nothing's coming out yet. So if we focus here a bit so that you guys can see better. Okay, so now if I just undo this very quickly, and I'm ready to install the other one after that. There shouldn't be too much liquid coming out, but you definitely have a little bit of liquid coming out. Here we go. And now we'll start threading the other one. And make sure that you thread this properly. You don't cross thread this. When you start threading this, you won't be able to go very far because of the thread sealant that's on the valve. So that's why you need to have your wrench handy and start threading. So you can see here that I haven't been able to thread that much with my fingers. So there's quite a bit of space left to thread. So the instructions from SpeedBleeder for this is that you thread this until it's seated, and then you do an extra 1/16 or 1/8 of a turn, and that's it. You stop there. So you're not going to follow the same torque specs from the manufacturer. So I had a little moment of panic, to be honest with you, when I was installing the SpeedBleeder valve on the master Brembo cylinder, because the new valve wasn't seated all the way through. There was like a little area that was remaining. It wasn't seated fully up to the nut. And I reinstalled the original Brembo valve, and I realized that there was also a gap for this one. So now, you know, my conscience is at ease. My heart is not racing anymore. So now it's perfectly fine that it's not fully seated right on the nut. So it's going to be sticking out just a little bit, and I didn't tighten it really tight. I just did, like I said earlier, I went all the way until it was snug, and then I did 1/8 of a turn, and I left it at that. So I'm going to repeat the same process here, and then we will be done with the front. So same thing here, I'm going to use my 11mm wrench. And when you do this, make sure that your reservoir is not open, because if it's open, the fluid will flow out very easily. So in this case, because this is at the end of the line here, I'm expecting this one to flow a bit more. So again, I will be ready with my 7/16 wrench and with my new SpeedBleeder valve as well. So we will unscrew this one. It's already starting to drip just a little bit. And we will swap this very quickly here. Make sure that you thread this properly, don't cross thread. So when you're doing this, make sure that you are armed with a lot of towels or paper towel, because if you have any brake fluid on your paint or your brake pads, you will not like that outcome at all. Okay, so that's it for the front caliper. So now we are ready to start flushing the fluid and making sure that there's no air bubbles remaining and that everything works perfectly. So I've opened up the front reservoir. I've covered everything properly. Now we're going to add a little bit of extra fluid because we've lost a little bit of it while I've replaced the valves, the bleed valves. You can use a bag or whatever type of tool you have. In my case, I'm using a vacuum bleeder here. I'm just going to connect the vacuum tube on that bleed nipple, and we'll crack this open by a quarter turn. And now we will just start pumping the lever, and you can see already that the fluid is getting out. But simply by pressing the lever, you can see that the fluid is being pumped out very easily. And I can just stop, I can refill, and I don't have to do anything else. So super easy, super quick to do, and definitely a much simpler process than the opening and closing of that valve. So I've just added a bit more fluid, and we will pump a few more times just to make sure that there's absolutely no air bubbles left. And you can tell that I didn't have to close that valve. I just simply left it open, and the check valve is simply reclosing itself automatically once you stop applying pressure. So that's really the beauty of this, because there's no air coming back into your brake lines, and no fluid as well. So it's simply pushing stuff out, but nothing can come back in. Okay, so now I've been pumping for a little bit. You can see it's only fluid, there's no air bubbles, so I'm happy with this. So now I'm gonna simply remove that hose, and we're gonna secure back that SpeedBleeder valve in place. So you can see now that I simply removed the hose. Didn't have to do anything with that SpeedBleeder valve. Everything stayed like it was. And now I'm gonna simply re-secure this back at the right torque specs here. Now we are done with the master cylinder, and I'm gonna move down to the caliper and we'll redo the same thing as well. Once more here, I'm gonna use my 7/16 wrench, and we're gonna crack this open by a quarter turn. And I'm just gonna simply press on my lever, and you should see here that liquid coming out right away. So super easy. You don't have to worry about opening and closing that valve. You simply press, and the liquid is quickly coming out here. So that's it, folks. There's nothing else to this. It's super easy. So now I can just simply re-secure this in place. Top off the reservoir with some new brake fluid, and we're done with the front line. So now we'll move to the brake line in the back of the bike, and we'll do the same thing. So now we will do the same process on the back caliper. So the size of the back caliper is M7x1. As you can tell, it's a much smaller unit than the front unit. In order to remove the bleeder valve on the back, we will need an 8mm wrench, and to reinstall the SpeedBleeder unit, we will need a 5/16 wrench. So make sure that you have plenty of rag or shop towels to make sure that nothing spills over. And we will simply crack this open. And again, when you do this, make sure that everything is close by and you can do that swap fairly quickly. I don't anticipate a lot of liquid, but there's certainly going to be a bit of drippings. And we will just remount the new one. Make sure that you don't cross thread again. And we'll wipe the excess, and I'll use the 5/16 key or the 5/16 wrench to tighten everything back. And once this is done, we will add a bit more fluid, pump it a few times, make sure there's no bubbles, and then we will test the brakes and the job will be completed. So in my case, I have the rear reservoir delete, so I only have a small hose, a small tube sticking out, so it's a bit more challenging to top off the oil. So I'll take my time and do this properly here. So you're going to simply remove this cap here. I've already lowered the clamp, so it would be a bit easier. And you can see the liquid went down a bit. So I'm going to top it off a little bit, and we'll pump the brakes a few times after that to make sure that everything is fine. It's a fairly quick and easy process to fill it, as long as you don't spill too much on the sides. We'll take the 5/16 wrench, and I'll simply connect my hose here. And we'll open this by a 1/4 turn. And I'll just gonna gently press the brake lever. And here we go. We already have some liquid getting out. So that's it. There's no bubbles coming out of this one. We didn't introduce any air. So I'm gonna screw this back in place and make sure it's nice and solid, and we'll remove that hose here. And we'll wipe everything, make sure there's no dirt and there's no extra brake fluid that's on the brake caliper. And when you buy the SpeedBleeder unit, they come with these little caps as well. So once you're done, simply add the cap, make sure that no dirt or water goes into the bleed nipple. So that's it for that portion. I'm going to top it off, and I'll come back on camera in a few minutes to conclude this episode. So folks, that's it for today. Hopefully that video was helpful. If it was, please do me a favor and smash that like button. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, connect with me on social media or post your comments below. And until next time, stay safe, ride safe, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.